Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction. It is wonderful to be here with all of you in Miami. Beautiful, wonderful weather that you are having. We had like the coldest winter on record in New York. So you all are doing something right just by physically living here. And I'm thrilled to be visiting. So by way of background, as just mentioned, I'm Rachel Wilson. In my day job today, I run cybersecurity, data protection, fraud prevention for Morgan Stanley's Wealth Management division. And by way of background before that, I spent the first 15 years of my career all at the National Security Agency, the NSA. I had a few different jobs in my 15 years at the NSA, spent a couple of years running the NSA's counterterrorism operations mission. So think of this as using technical means to get onto the devices used by terrorists. We'd hack in, we'd listen to their phone calls, we'd read their emails, we would geolocate them, and then I will admit my favorite part of the job, what we used to call kinetic remediation. This, of course, is taking those bad guys off of the battlefield. Did that for a few years, took a couple of years off my life. So for the ladies in the audience, this is when I started coloring my hair. You know, that moment where you realize that your stress level at work is kind of through the roof. So as a bit of a reward, I then got to spend the next 3 years in London helping the British get ready for the 2012 Summer Olympics. Now, another reason you all are lucky to be here in Miami, because last week I was in Southern California and those guys have got some serious pucker factor going on right now. You think about those Olympic Games coming to Los Angeles, coming to the entirety of Southern California, the cyber risks to those Olympic Games, specifically, if we make a choice as a nation through the Olympic Coordinating Commission not to allow the Russian athletes to participate in those games, think about what we are going to be up against. But I can tell you, back in 2012, we had the Chinese trying to hack into the clocks, the timers at the Olympic venues. We had the Russians trying to get into the databases that house the Olympic drug testing records, which, yes, makes perfect sense now, made no sense to us at the time. Just all kinds of miscreants looking to rub some grit in the eyes of the British leading into those games. I was thrilled to see them go off without a hitch and to return home to suburban Maryland to what I have to tell all of you as fellow cyber practitioners. This was my dream job. This was the job I had wanted from the day that I started at the NSA, and that was running the NSA's cyber-exploitation operations mission. So think of these as essentially your professional American hackers. And in this job, I would travel around the country trying to recruit the best folks coming out of American universities. These were kids that were getting big six-figure offers in finance, in tech. I was trying to convince them to come work for me for government peanuts. So what was my pitch? What was the one thing that I could offer these bright young kids that no one else could? Well, frankly, it was the opportunity to do something that would have been illegal anywhere else. And for a particular ilk of young person, you may know some of these folks, that opportunity to no longer be beholden to the Computer Fraud and Abuses Act, quite an alluring proposition. So we'd bring these kids in, we'd give them 18 months of highly classified training, teach them how to use America's nation-state hacking toolkit, and then conduct hundreds of operations a day, hacking into the networks of the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, stealing the secrets out of their networks, giving them to our policymakers, our war fighters, all with the goal of keeping the United States and her allies safe. Now, I tell you this was a dream job, and that was in part because as a technologist, like so many of you, I got to work pretty much every technology on the planet, including a bunch of things that you can't even buy in the United States. So think indigenous Iranian firewalls, cracked versions of Windows you can only find in North Korea. We'd have these things diplomatically pouched in. We would reverse engineer them, discover underlying vulnerabilities in them, and weaponize those vulnerabilities back against our adversaries. Also a dream job, though, as a leader. I got to lead a team at the NSA of the most smart, patriotic, and frankly, really weird individuals that you could imagine. We were doing work that for us was truly profound, bringing back what I used to call eye-watering intelligence, information that was so remarkable that when you thought about the fact that you were going to put it on the president's desk the next morning, brought a little tear to your eye. Now, you all can tell that I am incredibly proud of the work that the NSA and the intelligence community did in my 15-year tenure. I remain incredibly proud of the work that these men and women do to protect and defend us today. And guys, I gotta tell you, I have never been more proud than these last 5 years. Think about the world we are living in today. Between Russia, Ukraine, China, now the war in the Middle East, Venezuela, Cuba, you can't throw a dart at the map of the world right now without finding a country that we're at war with. Think about what that is doing to our men and women who are working tirelessly, but they're really damn tired of protecting us from all of these places. My heart remains at Fort Meade, Maryland. I'm going back someday. I just got to get my kids out of college. Now, all of that said, not everything about being the quote-unquote queen of the hackers at the NSA was all moonbeams and rainbows. There were some significant management challenges with that particular workforce. Top of the list of management challenges as the queen of the hackers, without a doubt, hygiene. Guys, it was not good. I will ask, how many of you have a 12-year-old boy in your life? How many of you have been a 12-year-old boy, right? Like, you did not smell good. And for those young men that never quite grow out of that phase, they all want to be NSA hackers. And it got so bad that I actually had shower caddies in my office. Folks would come in the morning, we'd give them a little bit of the sniff test. Is Joe ready for human interaction today? If the answer was no, we sent them down to the showers to get cleaned up before we locked them in a room. This was essentially running a frat house on a submarine. And there was no room for poor hygiene in this space. Other massive management challenges, the queen of the hackers, gaming addiction. Now, I am not kidding. This was a problem to the point where we actually hired a psychologist on staff. We were hosting PlayStation interventions, Xbox confiscations. I was getting girlfriends and sisters and mothers involved. Think about it this way. If you have an employee who is routinely late to work, that's a problem. But if you are late to work at the National Security Agency, I have to send the police to your house. I have to work with the assumption that you're on a flight to Moscow because, right, that happened to me. So I gotta tell you, at Morgan Stanley, it may not be all spy novels. It's not sexy. We're a bank. But at the end of the day, people show up to work on time. They generally smell pretty good. My day job has improved. So what do I want to talk to all of you about this afternoon, recognizing that I am the one thing holding you back from drinks, and I am fully appreciative of this. Well, I will tell all of you, and I love this audience because we are all in this together. We are practitioners in this. I don't sleep well in this job. 9 years as the head of cybersecurity for a large bank. Well, first of all, all of us need to be worried about job security. Not that we won't find a new job, but that the reality is that for people, for CISOs, especially of Fortune 50 companies, what's the average lifespan of a CISO at a large company in the United States? 18 months. So I'm on borrowed time, guys. Like that is keeping me up at night. But more than that, I would argue that all of us in the cybersecurity profession today should not be losing. We should all be losing sleep. The reality is the world we're living in today, 25 years I've been doing cybersecurity, I have never seen the circumstances as dire as they are today. So I'm going to start this afternoon by giving you all a quick tour of my sleepless nights. Then I'm going to pivot to what I worry about most for all of you and the institutions and entities that you support and defend. And then I'm going to tell you on a more personal note what I'm worried about for Americans across this country right now. We have, and I've been sitting in, I'm very interested in what we've been learning here. We've learned a lot today about what we as cyber professionals need to know. But my argument to all of you today is that we need to be amplifying this message, not just in the boardroom, my job, but in the dining room, in the kitchen. These are conversations that all of you as experts in this space need to be having with your families. You need to be having them with your friends, because if we don't, my fear is that global cybercrime actually has the potential to upend what are universal norms across the world today. So with that dire warning that none of us are going to sleep after today, my goodness, let's get started. So why don't I sleep in this job? Top of my list of sleepless nights for the last 9 years, without a doubt, North Korea. Why? North Korea is up against staunch international sanctions, has no domestic economy to speak of, and yet is trying to fund a wildly expensive missile and nuclear program. How are they doing this? How is North Korea funding its government in 2026? Well, China's certainly helping, but they're not paying for it. We are. North Korea is funding its government by hacking into banks and stealing money. So, how are they doing this? With lots of support from China, but in no small part because they have resourced their bank hacking strategy at a very high level. So the old adage, why rob banks? It's where the money is. We just never expected to see a nation take this on as the source of their gross domestic product. But that is exactly what North Korea is doing. And these ranks of North Korean government hackers just continue to grow. Estimates now have it at 15,000 people within the North Korean government who have bank hacking as their full-time job. Now, I tell my kids all the time how fortunate they are that they did not grow up in North Korea. My teenage daughter says that having me as a mom feels like living in North Korea, but this is not fair. The reality is that if you're growing up in North Korea today, on your 11th birthday, you are administered an aptitude test. You score best and brightest on that North Korean intelligence exam, and you are immediately on-ramped into the bank hacking program. These kids moved away from their families into dormitories, raised, trained to be bank hackers from the age of 11. Now, what's worse is that the North Koreans are very good at this. They're motivated. Now, think about it. Living in North Korea, maybe not the greatest of circumstances, but we all know the consequences of poor job performance in North Korea. So this is a very motivated workforce. And many of you, as cyber professionals, you've read the book, you've listened to the podcast of the notorious Bank of Bangladesh heist, conducted by the preeminent advanced persistent threat actor in North Korea, known as the Lazarus Group. For this hack, the Lazarus Group successfully gets into the Central Bank of Bangladesh and carts off close to $100 million over a long weekend. But what not everyone knows about that particular heist is that the North Koreans were literally a typographical error away, a spelling mistake away from that being close to $1 billion. These are non-trivial dollar sums they are going after. That's an eighth the reserves of the nation of Bangladesh, this close to gone over a long weekend. And this was not a one-off. Again, this is the strategy North Korea is employing to fund their government, to the tune now of more than 30 billion in losses over the last 3 years, so bad that the United Nations has actually published a report supporting the allegations of 27 countries around the world. Now, that $30 billion is a staggering number when you think about the losses. But for us, it is a terrifying number when you think about where that money is going, right into their missile and nuclear program. Now, as you can imagine, for the last year, my most sleepless nights have been dominated by Iran. Now, Iran, very different animal. They are not hacking us for money. The Iranians have long figured out that cyber represents an asymmetric threat. Think about it this way. Sailing an aircraft carrier into New York Harbor, into the Bay at Miami, that is a decade-long billion-dollar project. Building a nuclear weapon, thank God, has proven to be very challenging for Iran. So what do the Iranians do at times like this? They literally put 40 guys in the basement of a building in Tehran, and they are wreaking havoc on Wall Street, literally as I speak. Bank to bank to bank, 46 banks over the last 9 weeks of this conflict, conducting very disruptive denial of service attacks, all in retaliation for this military activity, economic sanctions, cyber actions. All of us need to be braced for impact when it comes to Iran. And of course, finally, I lose a lot of sleep over Russia. Now, Russia, again, a different animal, and we will come back to them in a minute, but I didn't want you all thinking that I was not worried about that great bear of our adversary. So what am I most worried about for all of you? Now, the big banks, we're very worried about these nation-state actors. When you are moving billions of dollars a day, the risk is very high. For your organizations, the thing that worries me most is the rise of cybercrime. Cybercrime now, easily the most lucrative form of organized criminal activity the world has ever seen. These are traditional organized crime rings that are now using cyber means to conduct crime at an unprecedented scale. And to give you a sense of just what a scale we're talking about, team, if we took all of the cyber criminals in the world and we put them in one country, that country today would have the third largest economy on the planet. We are talking $10 trillion in cyber criminal revenue last year alone. That is $25 billion a day being siphoned out of the global economy into the hands of these cyber criminals. And where is that money going? Well, it's going to fund all kinds of nefarious activities: human trafficking, drug smuggling, nuclear proliferation, and terrorism. If you ever doubt for a second how important your work is, just think about what you are preventing in terms of downstream consequences every time you prevent or detect a cyber attack. Now, why has this cyber criminal activity increased so dramatically over the last 2 years? Any of you who have been here today already know the answer to this. We've been talking about artificial intelligence nonstop. And while AI represents a tremendous boon to us in terms of productivity and effectiveness, make no mistake, it is bearing those same fruits for these cyber criminals. When I talk to my board of directors about the impact of artificial intelligence on the cyber threat landscape, I tell them 3 things. First, AI, combined, of course, with the proliferation of very advanced cyber capabilities, things that used to be the bastion of nation states that are now readily available for sale, for rent on the dark web, combine those things, and AI has done three things for cyber criminals. First, it has lowered the barrier to entry to being a quite competent hacker. If you went back in time 5 years ago, and you wanted to be a hacker, what did you need? Well, you needed a degree in a technical field, you needed access to a nation state toolkit, you needed covert infrastructure, you needed training. What do you need today to be a hacker? Well, you all have heard it, a little bit of ChatGPT, throw in some Claude, sprinkle in some Gemini, and watch some YouTube videos. You are off to the races as a quite capable hacker. Second thing that has changed, AI has been a tremendous amplifier, a catalyst for cybercrime, increasing the rate of attacks to a scope, a scale, a velocity that I could not have imagined 3 years ago. And lastly, and this is important, AI has made these cyber attacks virtually free to conduct. So at a firm like mine that is spending $750 million this year on cybersecurity technology, we're up against a world of cyber criminals that can operate at scale at de minimis costs. So I want to give you an example, just a minute, of the kind of AI-enabled cyber attack that I see in my day job every day of the week. And I want to explain how AI has changed the game in this space. So this, of course, what I'm about to describe, you guys have all seen it, is your classic credential validation attack, where a hacker goes out to the dark web and rents a botnet and then buys a list of credential pairs, logins and passwords. These logins and passwords have nothing to do with me, nothing to do with you. These are the logins and passwords from Name Your Breach over the last 10 years. Hacker goes out there, buys the list of 10 million logins and passwords, and then starts throwing them against my authentication gateway just to see what sticks, knowing that my clients, as much as I love them, are all using the same terrible password everywhere all the time. Just like your CEO and your mom, right? They are all doing this terrible practice. Now, how long would that have taken 5 years ago? We would have seen an entire human farm typing away those logins and passwords. Now, simply load that file into Claude, have it generate that Python script for you, hackers off to the races. Further speed up the process, again, more AI enabled. Hacker goes, rents this botnet, thousands of highly hackable endpoint devices, Internet of Things type devices. My attack 2 weeks ago, I had to explain to our board of directors that we were under attack by a herd of smart refrigerators. Guys, this did not go well. The board meeting, the board was asking me the make and model of the fridge. They wanted to know if their refrigerator had been implicated. One woman was telling me the lights were flashing and now she knew why. We were way off track. But that's the reality of cyber attacks today. 10,000 refrigerators, 10 million credential pairs from Name Your Company, inundating my front door. The botnet, of course, is not smart. It's a fridge. All it's returning to the hacker is a simple thumbs up, thumbs down. Vast majority of cases, thumbs down. This login and password don't work for any customer of this bank. But for that small but non-zero percentage that return a thumbs up, what happens next? Hackers logging into those accounts, trying to set up bill payments, money movements, all the kinds of things you would have seen a traditional fraudster do, but now with AI, scope, scale, velocity. And when I tell you that we're talking at de minimis costs, we estimated to our board that that entire attack sequence that I just described cost the hackers about $5. So my $750 million a year is stacked up against a couple of guys in Cambodia spending $5 to rent a botnet. Yes, sir. I can. So we'll come to this. Let's talk about it. We'll talk about it quickly here, and I'm glad you're raising the question. So as our panel previously had discussed, you all should think of quantum computing as essentially rendering moot all of the standard cryptography over the last 40 years. So if you think about the foundations of cryptography as I take a really big prime number and I multiply it against another really big prime number, and I get a really difficult long number to factor. It's taking a simple math problem of multiplying two numbers and turning it into a very hard math problem of factorializing a very long number. All of that gets much easier and much faster with quantum computing, where that computational power is through the roof. Now, I would argue that for the vast majority of people in this room, and this is going to sound potentially heretical, quantum computing is not going to matter in your day job at all. Why do I say this? Is because the vast majority of the encryption algorithms we rely on today, these are things that make the internet work, that make online banking work, that make your phone work, that make your credit card work, are going to be upgraded by the people who own those services. Our trust and faith will be in the Googles and Microsofts and Apples of the world, who are going to fix 95% of this problem for us. Now, for large institutions like mine, the challenge is going to be, I've got to find every legacy encryption algorithm in my entire environment, and I'm going to spend a lot of money to inventory every single one of them and make sure that I am upgraded across the board. But for the average American, quantum computing is going to be irrelevant in terms of anything you actually have to do on a day-to-day basis. But to your point, sir, the combination of AI and quantum computing raises really existential questions for those that are the purveyors of the backbone of the American economy, these large technology firms. Now let's come back for a minute to the Russians. I promised you that I would. And ma'am, I'm going to ask you a question in just a second. I promise it's not a hard question, but I'm putting you on notice. Brace for impact. So the Russians have a very interesting cyber strategy for this war these last 4 years. I'll ask all of you a question first, knowing that as cyber professionals, you know where I'm going here. How many of you think that because we have not seen big, splashy headlines talking about Russian cyber attacks over the last 4 years, that Putin, Russia, and his very potent cyber army are just sitting this war out? I tell you, there are pockets of America where they sincerely believe that to be true, that Putin is just taking a hands off, not leveraging that potent cyber arsenal. The reality is the opposite, that the Russian cyber army has been very active in this war, and they have been very active across the United States of America. Now, what the Russians don't want, and I say this begrudgingly, as both a patriot and as a former civil servant, the Russian strategy, cyber strategy for this war has been ingenious. What the Russians are doing is hiding in the noise of all of that cyber criminal activity that we just discussed. The last thing they want is escalation, attribution. They do not want another full frontal slap in the face colonial pipeline style attack, because that results in consequences. Instead, what the Russians are doing, again, hiding in that noise, taking very much a boil the frog type approach, slowly ratcheting up the heat, the amplitude of their cyber attacks in ways that go undetected for long periods of time, but are massively deleterious to American industries, especially institutions that are providing even peripheral support to Ukrainian refugees. So I want to give you an example of what these Russian-led cyber attacks have looked like for those of us in financial services, but I want you to all think about this through the lens of your institutions, your networks, your systems. If you don't think the Russians are there, I think you're wrong. So here's my question to you, ma'am. If we went back in time to before the start of the war with Russia and Ukraine, so say 5 years ago, and I asked you, your typical American retail bank, so think your Bank of America, your Wells Fargo, your Truist, your PNC. If I asked you what percentage of the accounts being opened every day at Chase were fraudulent, what would you guess? 10% is a wonderful guess and would have been the best day of my life. Like, that would have been an amazing day. Because the reality is that even 5 years ago, at your typical American retail bank, any given day, 30 to 40% of the account. Now, Wells Fargo, we're putting them aside. They're a different animal. I'm talking like your legitimate bank. Yeah, they had some issues there, but not this kind of issue. So let's say your normal bank, 30 to 40% of the accounts being opened every day were fraudulent. What was going on? Well, this is pre-AI. So you've got these huge human farms, massive warehouses filled with people sitting next to big stacks of stolen identities. And what they're doing is opening a bank account in your name at Bank of America, opening another bank account in your name at Truist. They link those two bank accounts and they harvest the 75-cent micro deposit that the banks send each other when you link an account externally. You guys have all done this. You set up some kind of external account linkage and you'll see those micro deposits go back and forth, the bank validating both sides of that transaction. Now, you would ask the question, what are you going to do with 75 cents? But if you are doing this hundreds of times a day across hundreds of people in Bangladesh, in Senegal, in Sierra Leone, there are entire communities that are living off of the harvesting of these micro deposits. Now, you'd also ask, why weren't the big banks doing anything about this? And the reality is that preventing those fraudulent bank accounts from being opened would have cost more than 75 cents. And so the banks were largely viewing this as a retail shrinkage problem, a cost of doing business, which might have been okay at 30 to 40% fraud. Then the Russians took notice of this trend, and they decided to use this same tradecraft but with a very different aim in mind. And we banks had no clue what was going on, except that the numbers were getting worse and worse. So just like all of you in the room here today, we're all working together on this. The big banks, we all work together in this space too. We are all actively collaborating, and we talk on the phone 3 times a week. What are we seeing in the environment? What are we doing about it? I got to tell you, in a mythos era, we are talking 3 times a day, but we'll come back to that. So we're talking 3 times a week, and my friend at Bank of America is telling us, you know, we were at 40%, now we're at like 60%. It's 3 months before the start of the war, 3 months before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. 2 months later, Truist is saying they're at 75% fraud. This is starting to look really bad. Now it's a week before the invasion. Tanks are revving up to cross the border. My best friend of 20 years, my counterpart at PNC, called me on a Saturday morning, first weekend in March, invasion is beginning, and says, Rachel, we got to get the gang together. Like the band, it's a Saturday morning, we need an emergency call. We just hit 95% fraud. We got together, PNC tells us they've lost $14 million in 2 weeks, and that they are going to take the unprecedented step of actually pulling their new account opening flow off of the internet. And the other big banks very quickly followed suit. For the next month, guys, if you wanted to open a bank account in the United States of America, you had to physically walk into a branch and be a real person. Now, was this attack hugely financially devastating? Yes, it cost the banks millions of dollars. Was it criminal in nature? Sure. But this was not conducted by any cyber criminal. Rather, this attack achieved exactly what it intended on behalf of the Russian government, in that it made it virtually impossible for millions of Ukrainian refugees to move their money to the safe harbor of American bank accounts over the course of that Russian invasion. This attack was a bona fide denial of service attack designed and effectuated to prevent, to stymie the flight of capital out of Ukraine while the Russians tightened the noose. Even today, you ask my counterparts at the large American banks, and they will tell you that upwards of 70% of the accounts being opened every day are fraudulent. Think about what this could look like through the lens of your business, your institution, the organization that you support. Again, give the Russians credit here. What they're doing right below the waterline, the iceberg is tremendous. Now, what do I worry about most for the institutions that you all support? We've talked about it some today, but I will tell you, I still fear that ransomware attacks are going to be the most lucrative form of cyber attack this year. So we saw more than $200 billion in losses just in the United States last year. I fully expect that number. In fact, it is already on track to be higher. Why are these attacks so lucrative? Well, it's because, guys, we all continue to pay. Even today, more than 90% of ransomware victims do, in fact, pay the ransom, which just incentivizes more of these cyber attacks. And as we as practitioners all know, these ransomware attacks today are not the pop-up on your laptop asking for $500 in iTunes gift cards, right? These are now all triple extortion scams, and they start with the hackers getting into your environment. It's that unpatched vulnerability. It's your dummy in the call center who gives them remote access. It's your CEOs clicking on links and downloading attachments. None of this knowledge to you. Now you've got this criminal syndicate in your network, and the first thing they're going to do is siphon off all of your sensitive data. Now, we have to bear in mind that these criminal hackers, they are not targeting you because you're you. They are targeting you because you're vulnerable. These guys are opportunistic. They are egalitarian. They are simply doing scans of broad swaths of the internet, looking for anyone who is vulnerable. They get in and they figure out how to monetize that access. And these attacks now, think of ransomware typically as going after small and mid-sized businesses. Now we see them going after nonprofits, universities, school districts, municipalities, hospitals. Today, the ransomware attack that I am working on behalf of a client is against a church in Tennessee. The hackers have gotten into the church's network, called them on Monday morning when they had taken down their entire environment. What the church experienced, they walked in Monday of this week, back-end databases are irrevocably encrypted, production environment is down, front-end website has been defaced with hate speech, all the computers blue screen of death. Hackers call the church and basically say, if you would like your systems restored, if you would like to reestablish access to your website and all of your social media accounts, we hackers are happy to help. We just need $500,000 in Bitcoin in this wallet in South Africa by 2 o'clock this afternoon. And if it's not there by 2 o'clock, make it 600,000. These hackers will continue to ratchet up the ransom until you are willing to pay. Now, the church calls me, and I tell them the same thing you all would tell them as cyber practitioners. Do not pay that ransom. What happens, guys, when you pay a ransom? You have now told the world that you are a person, an entity that will pay a ransom, and that means that the hackers will keep coming back. City of Baltimore, near and dear to my heart, all those years living in Maryland, has now paid a ransom to the same hacking group to restore the same database being exploited through the same vulnerability 6 times. This is insane. The definition of insanity. We met with them last year as a municipal client of Morgan Stanley's, and instead of fixing the problem, they have now put ransomware payments as a line item in the city budget. I thought this was crazy, but in the last year, I've seen the same thing in Atlanta, Minneapolis, Seattle, universities around the country, hospitals around the world, all of whom now view ransom payments as a cost of doing business. This cannot be good for America. So, of course, we tell the church, do not pay the ransom. They haven't decided yet. But the irony, and I told them this, is that if you as an institution pay the ransom, you will then have the best customer service experience of your life. These hackers will be on the phone with your IT gal in 5 minutes. They will be decrypting your data, debugging your router. I had a client tell me 2 weeks ago that her computers had never worked better than the day after her ransomware attack. These guys are good, and they're very reputationally sensitive. They will actually send you a customer survey afterwards. How was your ransomware experience with us? They want you to tell your friends and neighbors, yes, I got hacked by the Bulgarians. They were delightful. They want this to be good for you. So maybe you pay, maybe you don't, but the hackers are not done. Again, these are triple extortion scams. Hacker calls you back on Tuesday, pleasure doing business with you yesterday, forgot to mention while we were in your environment, we stole all of your sensitive data. So for the church, this is all the congregational records and all the Social Security numbers of their volunteer workforce. At your hospital, this is your patient data, it's your student data, it's your customer billing records, it is all of your employee records. Whatever you would be willing to pay to have restored, willing to pay not to have sold on the dark web, they're going to siphon all of that. And they will then offer you on Tuesday an agreement that in exchange for another $500,000 in Bitcoin, they will agree not to sell all of your parishioner data on the dark web tomorrow. You now have a promise, honor amongst thieves here, that they're going to protect you. But these hackers are not done. Guys, you got to bear in mind, these are businesses. These are entrepreneurs. And what does everyone in sales know? Is that when you make a sale, you don't want a one-time customer. You want a customer for life. And so when they call you back on Wednesday, it is to pitch you on a product you never knew you needed, ransomware as a service. Now a subscription model, Netflix-style billing for your hackers. In exchange for that monthly fee that you will pay in perpetuity, those hackers will offer you 3 things. First, they will help you keep your systems and running. Those Bulgarians are now part of your IT department. Second, they will agree not to sell your data on the dark web in the future. You now have an ongoing commitment from these hackers. But guys, here's the wild part. Here's the kicker. The money that you pay month over month is actually mafia-style protection money, because these hackers will also agree to help protect you from the other 4 hacking families around the world who want to come in and do the exact same thing. I am sad to report that I now have hundreds of clients who are not happily but are quite willingly paying one Eastern European hacking group to theoretically protect them from the rest. This is the brave new world we are living in 2026. Does your leadership understand what you all as leaders and practitioners in this space are dealing with day in, day out. Now, maybe your leadership doesn't get it. My leadership sometimes doesn't, but does your family get it? And this is where I'm really imploring you to view this cyber pandemic as what it truly is, which is a threat to our institutions around the country and around the world. I'm going to close today by giving you 3 examples of the sorts of scams that AI combined with cybercrime are conducting against my clients on a daily basis. But I want you to think about this through the lens of your friends and family. The first, very close to home, ladies, this is for you. My mother, 2 years ago, her husband of 25 years passed away. My stepdad, beloved member of our family, passed away unexpectedly. And my spidey sense started tingling. Because these hackers now, guys, they are actively mining your local obituaries in the local newspaper. They are obsessed with the newsletters of assisted living facilities. Someone passes away, and they are like moths to the flame. They immediately created a large language model that was trained on my mom. They researched everything in her social media, everything about her late husband, everything they could find in ChatGPT that they could find from Claude, and they built an LLM that they used to reach out to her over WhatsApp. They reached out to her, they said, Janet, I was so sorry to hear of Tom's passing. I remember your daughter's wedding in California. What a beautiful day that was. I remember that business trip we took to Tokyo, signed that great deal. Tom was such a great guy, and I was so sorry to hear of his passing. Just know that I'm here for you. Now, my mom didn't remember this man, but sure, he seemed to know a lot, have a lot of detail about her life, her family, her history. And for the next 6 months, this man did not ask for anything. He just talked to my mom. But ladies, I will tell you, there were hints, clues that she was not talking to a real man. This man replied to her text messages within 5 minutes, 24 hours a day. Not a real man. This man remembers every word she ever said. Not a real man. And after 6 months, sure enough, this guy starts asking for money for his kids' college tuition. He needs money for a piece of heavy machinery. He's got an investment opportunity. $300,000 later, we had to stage a family intervention. I sat down with my brother and my mom, and I said, Mom, you're not talking to a real man. I read the text messages. I'm half in love with the bot too, but that doesn't make this a good idea. She was heartbroken. Now, gentlemen, you are not immune to this. You're thinking, oh, why are these ladies falling for the romance? Now, men, you are motivated by something else. No, it is not what you're thinking. You tend to be motivated by ego and greed. And so I'll pick on you for a second here, sir. I could imagine someone reaching out to you and saying, I've seen that you have done very well for yourself, right? You've got a great lifestyle, really attractive, well-dressed. I'm very impressed with what I see, and you've clearly really succeeded. I too have done pretty well for myself, but I have made all of my money in crypto. My family, we're kind of behind the scenes on this. We made a lot of money in crypto, and we're about to launch a new coin that's going to make Bitcoin look like trash. And because of what a sophisticated and savvy gentleman and investor you are, we're going to offer you in on the ground floor. We really want you as an investor in our coin. So send $10,000. You send $10,000, you think, okay, what do you get in return? You get a URL, a login that looks just like a Coinbase wallet, just like a Kraken login. It looks legitimate. You log in and holy cow, that $10,000 you sent is now worth $20,000. You send some more money. You think you are making money hand over fist. But why, guys, are these called pig butchering scams? You are being fattened up for the slaughter. You keep sending money. You're logging in every day thinking that this is just the best thing. And of course, the guys told you, you don't want to tell your banker about this, right? And you definitely don't want to tell your wife because, you know, women wouldn't understand. So you just keep sending money. What happens the second you want $1 back? You're ghosted. None of it was real. I spoke to a client of ours a few days ago. This was heartbreaking. We had to get his wife on the phone. He had to explain to his wife that he had given away their entire life savings, more than $3 million, now in the hands, completely irrecoverable, gone forever, in the hands of these crypto butchers. Guys, what's the moral of the story? Men, women, all of us, if it's too good to be true, press pause, take a breath, all of these things. Now, I will close with this today. Finally, the scam that I think all of our parents and all of our CEOs are falling victim to. This is the one, of course, near and dear to our hearts as technologists, the classic IT scam, where the hacker calls up, in this case, it was a client of mine in New York on the Upper East Side, Barbara. Barbara gets a call from someone that tells her he is calling from Microsoft. Now, we all know this, right? Microsoft is never going to call you, right? Even when you want them to call you, they are not going to call you. But Barbara believes, she thinks she's talking to Microsoft. Now, I had to laugh afterwards because Barbara then admitted to me that she has a MacBook. Why Barbara thought that Microsoft was calling to fix her MacBook will forever be a mystery, but she's all in. She's on the phone. She gives the guy remote access to her computer. What does he do? He then installs the malware. Keystroke logger, he's harvesting all of her passwords, screenshots, he's taking pictures of all the websites she's going to. He tells her that her computer is fixed, but that he wants to make sure everything is working. So he has Barbara log into all of her email accounts, all of her bank accounts, brokerage accounts, credit cards. Oh, it gets worse, IRS.gov. He downloads all of Barbara's tax returns. Social Security Administration, he reroutes her Social Security checks. And the coup de grace, he has Barbara log into her Verizon account. Why? He sets up auto forwarding of all of her text messages. So all those one-time passcodes that we're sending everybody now saying, okay, multi-factor authentication across the board, all of those one-time passcodes are going directly to him as the hacker. 4 hours on the phone, he says, Barbara, you're good. Everything's working. What does he do as soon as she hangs up the phone? He is logging into all of her bank accounts, all of her credit cards. He is initiating wires, money movements, buying the hell out of whatever it is he can get his hands on. Now, my team, I think we're really good at this. My guys in Singapore detected this quickly. This was not Barbara's IP address, not her MAC address, where the timing advances on her browser were wrong. We were looking at the size and shape, make and model of her monitor. None of it matched. We knew this was not Barbara. But what happened when we tried to call Barbara? She's not getting her phone calls either, right? All of that stuff has been auto-forwarded. I end up having to call Barbara's daughter, who lives 4 blocks south from her. I know way too much about this family now. 4 blocks south, we're like, Dana, you've got to go see mom, right? Like walk north in the rain right now, knock on Barbara's door. We did like an in-house visit with Barbara. She says, Rachel, yes, there was a problem with my computer. Microsoft fixed it. Well, I did the same thing you all would do. I basically had Barbara declare cyber bankruptcy. We got rid of that laptop, disposed of it, zeroized it 3 times, did the whole DoD decommissioning standard on it, bought her a new one, got her whole digital existence reconstituted on this new machine. We get to the end of the week with Barbara, and she admits to me that she has been using the password kittens25 everywhere for the last decade. So I tell Barbara the same thing that you as cyber practitioners would. Barbara, I want you using a password manager app, right? I want you letting it create for you unique, complex passwords across all of your logins. I want you leveraging the storage of the password manager app. And I want you to stop using kittens25. She says, okay. Why? Well, I tell her, I was like, you're going to get unique passwords. You're going to get maximally lengthy random alphanumeric sequences that humans are terrible at generating and remembering, but that computers are great at. But that, Barbara, it is the storage, that cryptographically sound storage that password manager app is going to give you. She says, oh, so the Post-it note under my keyboard is not a good option. No, Barbara. How many times do you need to write down kittens25? We get to the end of the conversation, and Barbara says, Rachel, I hear you, but that all sounds kind of complicated. I am going to add an exclamation point. So Barbara's plan, and I guarantee your mom and your CEO have the same plan of now kittens25 for the next decade, not a good strategy for fooling the North Koreans, but our hands are with all of you. Thank you so much for having me here today. This was an absolute pleasure.